G'day, I'm Peter Anthony. Welcome to Growth Tales. Andrew Jones is an expert in psychometrics and sales performance. Expect to learn why psychometrics is so important to understand if you're interested in improving sales effectiveness, how psychometrics work to give you those answers, and why it's great to be expensive. Here's AJ's story. G'day, AJ.
Hi.
AJ, you're an expert in luminous sales psychometrics, and I was really curious to understand, why would anyone be interested in psychometrics in a sales environment? If I'm running a sales team or I'm a CEO of an organization, I'm thinking, why would I bother considering psychometrics in my sales organization? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me as a business psychologist, I'm going to go, of course you should be. And let me check. Psychometrics in general would just say, what am I like? What are my traits? But if you have a psychometric which is focused in the sales space, it might look at who am I and what are my traits and how is that likely to affect and show up as a salesperson. So for me, that's the kind of way in that psychometrics that are focused around the sales activities and processes can shed light on the way your people operate. And that's something that you can use to make them be more effective. They go back, the psychology and psychometrics go back to Jung in his book in 1921 on understanding personality types, but things have moved on.
Okay.
And you're absolutely right. The ocean model is the current way by which people understand how you and I may differ, how one person differs from another. And in a sales team, you're going to have a mix of different people with different gifts and strengths, and some who've got different capabilities that might get in their way. And that's part of the way where psychometrics can help you understand that stuff and move people to be higher levels of performance and better revenue streams. It's not measuring competence, which is somebody's ability to do a particular task or set of skills. What it's measuring is their inclination, their preference, their capabilities, and the degree to which they inhabit particular ways of being. So that sounds a bit loose and baggy, but it's like saying, this is what am I like as an individual, how am I likely to behave or perform in certain competencies or situations. Sales.
So am I more likely to be process orientated or people orientated, for example?
Absolutely.
Where's my preference? Yeah. Where's my preference?
What do I do easily? What comes naturally and comfortably to me? And what is more of a stretch and more of a reach, which again could look at how we can develop people.
Yes. And one of the age-old questions in trait psychology is it nature or nurture? I understand the current view is it's a bit of both.
That's very true.
Combination of both.
Depends what you're reading, depending on where you are, absolutely. But if anybody's on the call and it's interested and you've got maybe 2 or 3 kids, you'll find they all come out different. So there is some degree of genetics, there's some degree of disposition, there's also a wide variety of variety. And as a business psychologist with a twin brother, I can tell you that it's not all genetics. There's a lot of it that we were born up the same, raised the same, in the same household, the same parenting, and the same genes, but actually we still have individual variation based on preference and choices.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? If you are a parent, you'll notice the personality of your child coming through relatively young, like maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. You start saying, "Oh, that's who she is. That's who he is," and they just they grow into that. So there's definitely a nature aspect of it.
For sure. And if you look at children, even if you look at one of the most well-known psychometric traits like introversion, extroversion, you may have 2 or 3 kids and they'd be differently attuned in terms of their degree of extroversion or their degree of introversion.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. If you think of, like, in a sales perspective, introverted or extroverted, you think, well, a lot of that is also very situational too, isn't it? Because how introverted or extroverted I am depends upon who I'm with, how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking about.
You're right. The modern tools, like the ones that we're talking about, as for instance, say Lumina or other sales effectiveness tools, they would look at measuring both how much introversion and how much extroversion, as opposed to which are you. So you're right in terms of flexing, depending on who you're with, who's the buyer. Yeah, how much do I need to be leaning into my introversion or leaning into my extroversion?
Yes.
And if we have a data of how comfortable that is, you're right. And interestingly, I saw some research on introversion and extroversion in selling. And the graph is a curvilinear graph. So there was evidence that I went to have a French client who said, "I've got all the salespeople, they will be extroverts. I will not be hiring any introverts." So you're thinking, whoa. There's an increase in revenue towards extroversion up to a point. At that point, increasing the extroversion brings the performance down again. There's too much. because it's over the top for some buyers. So there's enough, and there's too much. probably true for quite a lot of behaviors, depending on being able to
Yes.
adapt the client and the buyer in front of you.
And probably what a lot of sales teams often employ clients or employ people from client organizations, because you want people that are, you're likely to have people that are similar to the clients or customers that you're selling to. Like if you're an engineering consulting firm and you're selling engineering consulting, you wouldn't want like a lot of very extroverted people selling to it necessarily. You might want someone who's a little bit closer to their introversion.
Absolutely. If you look at things like the big four consulting firms, the EYs and the KPMGs, they will have people who come from those industries. If they're dealing with, I don't know, defense contracts, it'll be people who've come from the defense sector who typically behave and operate in those ways. You're right, absolutely. My belief is there's always the scope for somebody who's slightly out of step with the context in which everybody else is, that can bring difference and variation and can also be successful if they're trained and motivated. But the majority will tend to be more likely to be similar to the natures of those that we're selling into.
Yes, or more similar to the clients.
Pharmaceutical sales would be a great example. You would need to have a biomedical science background to even be considered to be a pharmaceutical sales representative. The big pharma companies
Yes.
who put a lot of time and money into bringing the people in would insist that you've got some pharmaceutical background, which tends to be evidence-based, research-driven, and that kind of trait is valued, appreciated in that context.
Yes. And I guess even in that medical sales environment would depend upon whether you're selling to, say, specialists or GPs or selling to hospitals. It'll vary again, won't it? Because a lot of the big hospital sales are bought by administrators or buyers who aren't necessarily medical in their background. Whereas if you're selling to, say, specialists, you'll need to have a very high degree of skill and knowledge to even understand the conversation you're having with them.
Yeah, the credibility starting point is quite high in some of those complex sales cycles. Absolutely right. Independent of your personal traits. Yeah, sure.
What I really like about the limited sales model is it takes the presumption of six stages in the sales, like from researching and acquiring market, to prospecting, to developing needs, to making recommendations, right through to managing the relationship or managing the account. And there's 6 stages that are true in almost like any sales environment. Those 24 traits are then consistent with those stages. So we have four traits per stage.
That's right. There's different styles. So there might be a different style for prospecting depending on your personality, or you might have a different preference for the pitching stage, or you might have a different manner by which you go about doing the research. Absolutely. And that's certainly, for a start, interesting to know. And if you've got enough people in the sales team, you can see which of those seem to work best, which approaches, which particular sets of traits can be more effective in those stages of the cycle. Absolutely.
Each individual is measured independently on those traits within those 6 sales stages. If I'm a sales director, I'm thinking, well, I'm curious as a sales director, what stages make the biggest difference in my sales group? And then within that, what traits are more likely to move the needle the most or to be most effective, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've got enough salespeople in your team, you can probably get that data and look at it. Who are my top performers? What particular patterns and traits do they exhibit that make them effective? But once you start diving into it and having those conversations around the various stages, you can see how they do it. So not just are they performing higher, but whereabouts in that sales process might there be particular strengths that enable them to be performing higher. Otherwise, it can be a little bit of a mystery. Yes, these are my top performers, but what are they doing? What are the particular activities that they are doing that some of the others may not be? And that's where the psychometric will shed light. That gives you that spotlight on things to explore. And actually, often sales is an individual sport, so you never actually see what they do when they're out live with the clients. They're all off on their own. You're not accompanying them. You're not taking them there. And actually, the whole essence around being able to understand the qualities and gifts that they bring in each of those stages and be able to articulate those. And that's the stuff where the richness lies in terms of showing that and working with that across the team.
Yes, and it could be, I know a lot of high-performing salespeople I've worked with, a lot of them don't know what they're doing. I mean that respectfully. They're very intuitive. They've been doing it for a long time. They're very intuitive and they just sell. I think, why just go out and sell to people? I think, well, even for the high performers, it could give them insight into what makes them high performers. What is it they're doing, to what degree that is going to help them become more successful?
Absolutely. If you ask somebody what makes you successful at what you do, often the answers are a bit vague and a bit loose. Well, I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm highly motivated. Great. So what are you doing though?
Yeah.
And it's not saying what's your past history.
Yeah.
Your inclination. We're saying, well, what are you doing? And you're right. That intuition may not work. And if you look at things like maybe a core sales capability, it might be adapting. So they said, yes, of course, I just adjust my bios. And you go, how? What's the process?
Yes.
And it's just learned over time. So you're right. It's often at the unconscious competence level, and bringing it down to the conscious awareness can allow them to really process it, have more of a deliberate conscious approach to the way in which they engage with different clients and different styles of buyer.
Yes.
That vocabulary and being able to articulate it can then be shared across different salespeople in a sales team, for instance.
Yes. I was working with a client recently, AJ, and I said, what is it about your best guys? What do they do well? And he said, well, they just close more than the others, which is like cart and horse. They close more. Okay, that's why they sell more. They close more. But I said, what in particular about how they close makes them better? One of the great insights that Lumina Sales can give that sales director is the different type of closing that could be relevant. Because it could be that they're a collaborative closer, which means they're building relationship and collaborating and closing that way. The client almost closes themselves. Or they could be a decisive closer where they're putting pressure, like the old school challenger model, like almost pressuring the client to buy.
Yeah.
Or it could be more an intuitive close where they just get a sense of this is the right time to ask. I've got that intuition. You think, well, 3 different ways of closing. You're not quite sure what they're best at and to what degree. And if you're thinking, well, I just want them to close more, what type of closing works with your particular clients? Because I'm sure in each environment, different clients like to be closed in different ways.
Completely. And there's a list of closing techniques, from the assumptive close to the alternative close to the minor point close and stuff. Interestingly, before I was coming on for this interview, I said to my wife yesterday, I said, I'm going to need a joke or something about sales. And my wife said, well, she said, tell them that you got to date me by using the alternative close, which was exactly the way my first date with my wife. So you're right. There are different closing techniques for different circumstances. How you make those choices. Are they deliberate? Are they intuitive? Are they unaware? Are they conscious choices? That's the sort of stuff that the psychometric tool would shed light on and illuminate. So you can say, actually, I think I alternate between the push close, and sometimes I use the pull close or the collaborative close. And then you can say, what makes those choices for you? And they can say, well, it's so, I don't know, pace or style of the buyer, or it might be around the journey cycle and the work that they've done before in the proposal stages, or whatever it might be. Interesting.
And you think a lot of that closing, or that ability to close, could come from stages that you did well earlier. Maybe you understood their needs better. And you're better at asking questions and understanding needs. Absolutely. And therefore you could close better. Or maybe you're better at making recommendations, or maybe you're better at prospecting, and maybe the prospects that you're closing are better prospects, are more likely to be closed than the other people who aren't prospecting as well.
Yeah, you were
closing as well because they're closing the wrong people or the wrong clients.
You weren't screening the right people in the first place who are more likely to be able to commit.
That's why I like those 4 key traits in each stage, because they all could be important for different reasons. And one of the things I love about Luminous Sales is how you can correlate the traits. You can look at the high performers and say, what combination of traits at what level makes them successful, or makes them the most successful? It's not just one thing. It's not just being able the ability to close. There will be a lot more than just that.
Absolutely. There'll be a whole series down the process in terms of their journey to get from initial targets to close and actually account management. You're right. And actually, they may be unaware of the combination and sequencing of the gifts that they bring to that process. And this gives them the opportunity to look at both the particular gifts and also the where they use them well. In terms of sales effectiveness, you can also look at what do they do that gets in their own way, because even the skilled and experienced salespeople will have their own patterns and routines, and sometimes they may overplay parts. They may be on that kind of unconscious autopilot, and actually holding back might be even more effective.
Yes. So you think that's the side we haven't spoken about yet, AJ. We think it's not just these 24 traits at the effective level, it's the 24 traits at the overextended level.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
What am I doing? Where am I tripping myself up? Where am I pissing the clients off? Where am I doing things that actually inhibit their ability to commit? There may be salespeople who overtalk, and the moment's passed. they oversell. They've sold the product in, and then they've brought it back again before the client had the chance to. And you think, whoa.
To buy it.
Or the client was ready to move in terms of where they were in the buyer cycle, but actually the individual wasn't tuning in enough to notice that moment, and it passed.
Yes. You're looking at that from really two ends of the stick. You're looking at that highly effective or the effective qualities and the overextended qualities for the high performers, but also for the lower performers. And it was interesting in a project I did just recently, the low performers, their overextension was conceding close. What they did most when they were overextended was they conceded, right?
If you're a people pleaser, if you have that inclination, or if you're driven by pressure and desperation to achieve targets, you might actually concede. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, you might be conceding. And then you think, and this is the conversation I had with the sales director, we had this conversation around what's causing them to concede. Is it because they don't really understand the value proposition well enough? Like if I'm selling whatever, I'm selling pharmaceuticals, I'm selling engineering services, whatever I might be selling. If I don't understand the value proposition well enough that holds the price, maybe that's why I'm conceding, or maybe I'm conceding because my targets are too big. There could be lots of different reasons why I'm conceding.
And actually,
couldn't there?
In terms of getting into helping the individual salesperson understand their own thought patterns and minds, again, there are skilled and effective leaders and sales directors and sales leaders who will notice those areas. And actually, again, the psychometric will give some clues into some of the areas that the individual might be driven to be, I don't know, confidence or concern or worry, the stuff.
Yeah.
I'm been self-employed, independent for 30 years. I am the manufacturer of my own prosperity by selling. And actually, there were times when I was under pressure and not delivering performance and not hitting targets. And of course, times when I was not out of the park. But actually, that psychology stuff of what it is that bends you out of shape, that might lead to, for instance, conceding at the end, can be something that can be understood and then worked on. That's the trick.
Yes. And you think in a sales environment, there's more likely to be overextended behavior because it's more likely to have there's this stress around targets and sales, and everything is so measurable because it's one of the most measurable roles in the world, right? That you can have.
Compare it with things like sports people, Olympic athletes. You know what your best time is. When you're in sales, I don't know, when I was in sales in an earlier part of my life, they had the scores were on the board in the room. There was 20 of us in a room, and you could see who was doing what and who would deliver what. So there was high visibility. And when you were at the bottom of that list or lower down, it does get you for sure.
So even the sales team as a whole, even the high performers are going to be in a stressful, challenging, target-driven environment. So you think where I go when I'm overextended, or what behaviors I exhibit, or what my preferences are when I'm overextended is really important for me to know, and really important for the sales leaders to know if they're managing and leading those people.
And exactly. And there may well be ways in which they can develop strategies to mitigate that impact of that. And that some of that is about leadership. I agree, but some of that is about tailoring that to each individual, so that they don't get in that state where they're then, as you say, losing their grip on the value of the propositions that they sell, and then that affects their confidence. Absolutely right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a whole variety of it. And actually, if we look at the role of those sales leaders, they probably got where they were by having great gifts, but they did it in their own style. The other issue about bringing the psychometric is it may be that there are some of your high performers who are delivering really well, despite your style, Mr. Sales Leader. They may have their own way of doing it. It was the sales leader. And actually, John and Simon do it differently, and they are also performing really well, even though they are very dissimilar from the way I learned to do this. So there's almost that diversity of different ways of understanding how people can be effective in the roles they have in that context with that organization, as clients.
That's true, that they're likely to become sales directors or sales leaders because they are great salespeople, but they might not be great sales leaders. You'll promote a great salesperson into a sales leadership role, and you've lost a good salesperson. You've got an average manager or an average leader. I've seen that. I've worked with people that got promoted in those senior roles, and they requested to get unpromoted or demoted back because they didn't like that.
It's a different skill, and actually giving them a tool in their hands that they can help them have those better conversations with those that they lead. That's another upside for the psychometric stuff. Once you understand the tool, you can have much more detailed, focused, personalized conversations with each of your salespeople. That's the gift that
Yes. Yeah.
otherwise you are probably your own style, approach, and sales techniques that you add to bear on each and every individual, which
Yeah.
may not be the whole picture.
And one of the awesome outcomes of using limited sales in a sales organization is that it gives you a common language and common approach to have those conversations. So if you're talking about closing, like an intuitive close, we both know what we're talking about. It's not like you've got your version, I've got my version. We're both using the same language and the same approach and the same process, and it's there for us both to see. So it makes us easier to have that conversation.
And it also allows us to consider there may be other approaches. So if you look like just a push sale versus a pull sale, actually,
yes,
it may be that I'm coming from a push style. I only do sell. I do sell and persuade. I don't really do pull as much as I would like. I do it in other areas of my role. But actually, if people are being effective with a pull style, for instance, that values their approach. And it may well be that's the case. And actually, there are some core elements which all sales folks need. You need to have empathy. You need to be able to engender trust. You
yes,
need to be able to do an approach which requires some of that pull. At some stages in the sales cycle, pull is going to be something that you need to be able to step into. And it gives people a trait, even if their natural style is on the push style, or the same as vice versa. There are times you need to push, and that's the close stage. So it gives people a sense of kind of where are my natural inclinations supporting me in various stages around the sales cycle? Where might I need to add to my repertoire? What might I include? And one of the things that's great to do when you take luminous sales to a team is they can have those conversations and say, how do you do an intuitive close, Peter? Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you do your network marketing? How do you do that engaging with the market base? How do you do your research? I may find something that I can learn. So that stealing of best practice is very rare within sales teams. Very rare.
When I look at my sales pitch for luminous sales, when I'm talking to a sales director, one of the first things I say to them is that they'll say, you just want a big sales training budget. And I'll say, no, what I'll be doing is helping you to reduce your sales training budget and increase its effectiveness.
Oh,
because
sweet.
It's very likely that once we understand these traits and their effectiveness in terms of how much the clients engage with those particular traits, you can coach each other. I can just help you identify how to go about doing that, like what you're coaching each other on, like what you are superb at and how you can teach that to your colleague. Ultimately, they're traits that work with clients, right? They're particular combinations of traits that the clients are engaging with. So it's really about the clients. And some of the interesting work I've seen over the past couple of years is where sales culture is measured and then client experience is measured. And they predict each other. The client experience predicts the sales team culture. The sales team culture predicts the client experience. Wherever you go, there you are. You can't hide from it. You can't hide from the clients when you're in a sales role. So you can coach each other. So it actually, using a tool like Luminous Sales can help you spend a lot less, because otherwise, if you're running generic sales programs and everyone's getting the same dip of the same core, it may not work at all, or it may work a little bit on some people, not at all on others. Some of your best sales coaching can be happening from inside the organization, and you're paying them already. You may as well get full use of them.
Exactly. And once you train people on your sales techniques or processes for your organization, doing that again and doing it again or doing it differently isn't going to move the dial as much as understanding how are they executing the processes and the procedures and the ways in which that you engage with your clients.
So how do we do that here with our clients, with our products, with our services, and with our clients? How do we do that? Because there's going to be something like, if you think I'm in a big four consulting firm, everyone says they're all the same, but they're all a little bit different. Once you get inside them, they're a bit different. They've got a different culture, a different way of going about things. You think, well, how do we do this at EY?
Yeah.
Like, what is the EY way of doing this, for example?
That'll be the corporate culture and the values. And actually, again, if that's the way we want to be known, the way we want to be experienced by our customers, we can see which of those traits support that. And we can emphasize those to all of our salespeople. And we can look at which bits others bring from their own gifts and styles that they bring that helps them be effective. Yeah, I concur. It's that whole process of chasing new sales performance, sales processes and techniques. It's limited. You can spend a fortune on those every year. Oh, let's have another training. Let's have another training. Rather than saying, well, they're quite well trained. What we want to do is make them more effective. Personally, each one of them, and find the bits that you work for you, for me, the bit that works for her, the bit that works for him. And for that, you need to find out where they are. That's where the psychometric comes in.
Yes.
That other side of the coin. Yes. There's the process that got the organisation, the values on this side. The other side of it is, where are you? If we can join those up and get the how to be more effective, that's money well spent.
Yes. Yes. Because that then puts those values in action. It makes them verbs, not nouns, right?
Ooh,
it makes them things we're doing, not just, it makes them verbs. It makes them things we're doing. I mean, people can walk in and feel it. I mean, if I'm a client of that big consulting firm, I can feel those values. I don't need to see them on the wall.
Yeah.
I can feel them in how I'm being treated.
Yeah, you'll meet at a reception and the way you're greeted, you'll probably find it before you get to the meeting room.
It's interesting. I just wanted to circle back. You were talking about diversity a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I'm really curious about. I'm a big fan of the wisdom of the crowd. I like the idea. That and I've shown this in workshops, in groups of people. Like a smart, well-formed team makes a smarter decision than its smartest member, for example. And part of that smartness is diversity of thought, right?
Correct.
And you think, okay, so to an extent, the more diverse the thinking is, the smarter the decision's going to be. But then you think, well, but in a sales team, there would need to be, or there's likely to be some boundaries around that, only because there's likely to be some common behaviours and some common ways of thinking that are more likely to deliver a result for that client in that particular organisation. So it might be a few more guide rails on that than in a regular team.
I think that you're probably right.
Is that something that
but it depends where you want to go with this, because some sales leaders might want to say, who's the right player for the play? So which particular of my sales group best group is for this particular buyer or client organization? So there may be a choice of who gets which accounts. And again, some sales folks will move accounts around. It depends whether you're more into the account management or the acquisition, the account acquisition. So the hunter-gatherer model, if you're looking at account management, there may be people who are better suited to account management of this client than that client, and they shuffle those around. And that would certainly be the case in the big four consultancies. In terms of the client acquisition, that's a slightly different issue, because you may not know the client well enough to work out which of your sales team is most compatible with those. But certainly one or two of the consultancies I've worked with think about who's the right player for the play, for sure.
Yes, they do. That they have someone leading the pitch that's likely to understand that client environment better than others, or may have sold something similar to a similar sort of client. Like if I'm working for a big consulting firm and I've got a big bank or a big insurance company as a prospective new client, and I've already worked on a big bank or a big insurance company, I'm probably more likely to pick to lead that. At least I'll understand how it works and the culture and the business dynamics and the business drivers than someone that maybe come out of pharmaceuticals or a different sort of background, potentially.
To a degree, that's about relevant experience, but there may also be particular styles. So, there was...
I see.
Yeah, so, I mean, when I was a young man as a salesperson for an oil company, there were some clients that I just hit it off with and had a ball with. There were some that I had to really work hard at. There was one who was my biggest account. And the guy who ran it, the guy in the service station that I was looking at, who was my biggest client, was detailed beyond belief, was deeply structured, was a very contained guy. I was like a young man full of, gung-ho. He had a large desk with nothing on it. And I'd come and sit in and he'd open the drawer, pull out this leather book, which he would open, and there was tiny writing. And he'd say, Jay, yes, things I need to discuss today. And then we'd go and we'd put it in his drawer and lock it, and we'd walk around the site. And we never did first names. It was formality beyond my expectations. And there would have been other people who would have been way better suited to attending to his account than me. As it happens, it was geographic, and I got all the people on my territory, whether they suited me or I suited them. I learned a lot. Adjusting my style from clients. I was dealing with a particular region, and some were more formal, some were less. But in some cases, it may well be possible to assign the right style of representative to the right client. That's people might shuffle the accounts in some places to make that work.
It's tricky, that, isn't it, AJ? I mean, I know when I was a kid, like, I'm thinking 6, 7, 8 years old, I was a very introverted kid. I loved sitting in my bedroom reading books. There was a little library on the way home from my school. I'd walk home from school. I'd get books and I'd come home and read them. And my mother comes from a very big Irish Catholic family. And every weekend there'd be relatives coming over, particularly her brother would come over and with his kids. And so I'd come out and talk to your Uncle Harry. And I'd be like, yeah, no. And she said, just ask him questions and listen to the answers. And I did that. I asked him questions and I got great answers. A lot of people think I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually very introverted, right? I just like asking questions and listening to answers. But to the point about adjusting style, sometimes it can appear to be disingenuous if you adjust too much to the people that you're with. Like if they're very quiet and you become very quiet, or they're very noisy, you become very noisy, or they're very detailed and suddenly you're all into the detail. It may be respect, which it is, but it may also just appear to be, oh, this is a bit disingenuous because he keeps changing depending upon who he's with.
I would kick back against that and say, if say you and I could develop a broader vocabulary of behaviours so that we become natural and we can habit those, then actually we will be able to have more flexibility and still be who we are. So I don't think we're taking up amateur dramatics. I think you're right. If we try to act like somebody else and step into a different role, it might be disingenuous. But what if we could help each and every member of the sales team get a broader vocabulary of ways of working in various stages of the sales cycle? Then actually, that could be comfortable, and that you became comfortable with asking questions to Uncle Harry. That was genuine after a while. You got quite good at it. You'd rather be in your room reading your book, but you learned, okay, I can do this and I can do that. So we can add additional threats. So instead of having a narrow span here, we can have a broader span of behaviors that we can call upon that are practiced, that are skilled, and are authentic. That's the trick, and that's where we can learn from other people's styles in the sales team. What do you do in your research stage? What do you do in your proposing? What are the questions you use in your need identification sessions? What are the questions you use? Maybe I can use those and find they work for me too, even if I ask them differently.
Yeah, and be thinking too, if I think of those 6 Lumina sales stages, I'm thinking like researching and acquiring market knowledge, maybe a more introverted, analytical type of trait. If I love researching and acquiring market knowledge, whereas if I'm someone that's more into intuitive closing or collaborative closing, or making recommendations, maybe I'm a little more extroverted. So we may not get the same people being good at all the necessary traits. No. It might be, which may be why some organizations have all the researching and planning done by a different group of people than the client facing.
When you mentioned the 6 stages earlier, some organizations divide those stages up. So for instance, the sales, the genuine sales, client acquisition folks, the business developers may not do the market research. They may have a different team that does market research, but only in marketing. And the account management, the final stage of sustaining the account over time, might be done by a different group of people. The sales folks might specialize on stages 2, 3, 4 of the process, or 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there's somebody else doing the marketing with call lists and with outbounds and with centers that do that, or other social media based acquisition issues. Whereas the face-to-face stuff might be for the sales professionals. And actually they may have, you're right, a more refined set of traits that suit them in those markets, in those contexts. Absolutely right. The everyone being everything is unlikely. By the way, in terms of the market research, the analytical, data-driven based may be different than, say, my approach, which might be attending conferences and trade shows. And if I don't pick up some business while I'm there, I feel I've had a bad day out. So it would be done live at trade shows, rather than others who might be doing a much more, as you say, reasoned, thorough, meticulous, and discipline-driven approach to market information and intelligence. But both might have a place, and actually sharing those between each other. Others I could learn from the people with that more detailed analytical approach. They may also learn from me. So when you get sales teams in the same room, which is a thrill. I think you've been off the road for a while and you start looking at some of these traits and looking at, how do you do that? What makes you effective in that part of the sales cycle?
Yes.
And then I say, well, we can steal from each other.
or effective in different ways. I recall going to a conference recently, and I went to, it was a banking and financial services conference, and it was full of potential clients. I went with two colleagues, one who he is exceptionally extroverted. He is never alone and he never stops talking. And the other is exceptionally introverted. She finds it exhausting being around people. And there were several like breakout sessions where we had to network, and I was curious about how they were going to go about that networking and who would work the best, who would it work best for.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing was the extroverted guy came back with like probably 20 or 30 contacts in his phone. They'd exchanged their profiles and their LinkedIns and had like a huge list of people he'd spoken to. Whereas my introverted colleague, she only spoke to one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she really sold her entire organization to that one person in that conference.
Mm-hmm.
So she was actually more successful.
I have no...
Because she had one conversation.
It's depth versus breadth.
And he was bragging afterwards. He was bragging afterwards about all these contacts he'd made, all these people he'd spoken to. And she said, "Oh, I only spoke to one." And he was like looking down on her as, "Oh, you only spoke to one, you know." That's so great.
And she's got...
But it was one that represented a very large potential client, which she did win. And she pretty much won them over by talking to them.
Interesting. That reminds me of a quote that changed my life around that, which is what experience do you bring when people meet you? Like that one individual lady, you said she represented the organization to them, to a large clients, and they were in some way bought into what she is. I want to share a quote with you, which I think will help, which transformed my ability to understand what it is I did and what I sold. The quote it came from a book I was reading from Tom Peters. If you remember him in the old days. Remember Tom Peters?
I remember Tom Peters. Yeah. How to Master the Art of Selling Anything.
Well, he had books on business and all that. And this was about your personal brand. Experiences are as different from services as services are from goods. So as a consultant, I was selling services. You need some business psychometric stuff. You need some team development work. Actually, when you meet somebody at a conference, what are they buying? They're not buying those services. You get that later after the proposal and after the sign-off. What they bought is the experience. So the experience of that one lady, your colleague, that experience that they had of her at that conference, that's what they bought into. The rest of it will follow about proposals and pitches and sales stuff. And if salespeople are able to know what is the age experience, what is the Peter experience, what is it the clients get if I meet them at a conference or I meet them at a meeting? Could they articulate what that is? Do they know what it is that the client gets well before the sale point? That's stuff that I've been working on for probably 15 years or more to understand what it is, the effect that I have when people encounter me in a sales context. Now, for that, something like a psychometrics really help. I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, what's the Peter experience? I know what it is. I know what my experience of it is. Could you articulate it? Could that one lady that you took to the conference say, what's her name, by the way? First name?
Her name's Catherine.
So
Catherine with a K.
Yeah, so what Catherine experienced that client bought? Could Catherine tell you what that is?
And it's interesting. It reminds me of some research I read recently from Wharton Business School, and they exited a whole range of clients that had recently bought in B2B environments and asked them, why did you choose one supplier over the other? Mm-hmm. And they were interested in, like, from the client's point of view. And the number one factor was that I felt they uniquely understood my needs and my experience. They demonstrated they uniquely understood me, or my problem or my moment.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So the ability of
and
to show that they understand deeply is probably the experience that they were buying from that lady, Catherine.
Well, I'd say her selling point is that she's got two C's. She's very curious, and she really cares. And she doesn't like selling anything unless it's right for the client. She doesn't like selling.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
She said, I just like helping people, understand what they need and helping them. Like, help them. Great. If I can't, I won't. And she's so considerate. It's almost annoying being around her. She's so considerate.
I get that completely. I have very few superpowers, but one of mine is curiosity, and I love that. And actually, if they can genuinely bring that curiosity to bear on what's going on for the clients, that can be one of the things that makes the difference. Interestingly, it's all going to take a while to develop that as a trait, but it can be taught. I ran a masterclass during lockdown. One of the clients that I work with, who's involved in sales of high-end automotive products. I can't mention a particular German car manufacturer, but they sell that around the world. So it's they work for a particular German high-performance sports car model, and we work with the team in the Middle East, Africa, India, and the UK. So when the lockdown came, couldn't do the face-to-face training programs around behavior and empathy and the mindset of selling and all that kind of stuff. But we did masterclasses, and we did one on Cura. And there are books, and there are ways, and there are processes that enable people to connect with their own, which actually is one of those things when you have a great salesperson and the sales leader is saying, how did you do that? They say, oh, well, I was just doing this. I showed interest. And again, you can pick on that and find out the degree to which their curiosity is in them. What are they curious? Is it about the person? Is it about the business? Is it about both? So when they're hitting the right buttons, if you wish, for the salesperson, for the sort of buyer to feel comfortable, they're probably hitting the personal and the business need, the rational and the emotive. You know the old story about people selling for IBM. Yeah, you probably know this one about why people bought IBM. The salespeople would say, "No,
Yeah, I do.
Nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM.
We got fired for buying IBM. No one ever got fired. It's interesting. That was my first sales experience.
Wow.
My first role out of university was selling at IBM. It disappointed my mother hugely because she wanted me to be a lawyer. But I joined IBM because they were paying twice as much. There's three reasons. They're paying twice as much as anybody else. I got a car and I got a year of sales training. So I thought I'd go there, I'll get the car, get the money, take a year of sales training and leave.
Wow.
That's what I thought. When I joined, you had these branch office periods of about 2 weeks a month, and then 2 weeks, the other 2 weeks you're off at workshops being taught the IBM way of selling.
Wow.
And I was fortunate. I was given a really good person to mentor me. And his name was Rod, and we sold a lot together. And I was making what they call the 100% club. And then the more into the sales training I got, the less I sold. And Rod tapped me on the shoulder one day, my mentor. He said, "Can you stop doing that stuff? Right? Can you stop doing that stuff?" And because I was really curious. I was really eager. I was really curious. I was working my butt off for Rod and for the clients and the prospective clients. And I became quite a maverick because I was selling a lot and going to these 100% clubs around the world and not following the process.
Wow. So
because I found the more I followed that structured sales process, the less I sold. I'd say that my biggest sales trait there was just gratitude. I was so grateful and so keen and working so hard. They saw that. And they bought from me because I worked hard for them. And I remember my boss saying, "Who are you working for, Peter?" "You're working for IBM." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm working for the client. It just so happens I'm selling them IBM gear. And if that's what they need, that's great. But if not, but that worked because the clients felt that. The clients felt that. And Rod was the same. Rod really cared.
You had their back. You cared. You were interested. You cared, and you were curious about how you could help. That was we're working for them. I mean, we would actually like almost work against our own quota to sell them what they needed, not what would work best for us, and they knew that. Perfect.
And that's why we sold more.
That's because they felt that your self-interest was low. Interestingly, that sort of are you here to help the client's agenda or your own agenda? That's a fabulous area to explore with sales folks. And again, a psychometric can shed some light on where you're focused.
Yes.
But are you there for the client's needs, or are you there for your targets? And how do you reconcile and overlap those in ways experienced authentically by the buyer? You probably know the trust.
Yes.
Everyone knows the trust formula these days. But the self-interest, the one underneath, is the one that actually destroys the trust in the mind of the buyer. So actually, if your interest was
the
client's needs first, if I happen to hit my target, that's great. But I'm interested in the client's need first. That's what they were buying. Yeah, nice.
Yes, that's what they're buying. And you mentioned Tom Hopkins, another old school sales guru, was Zig Ziglar, wrote a great book called "I'll See You at the Top." One of his great lines was, "In a sales role, you'll get everything you want when you give them everything they want, but they've got to go first."
Oh, I love that. I'm going to give you one of
So
my.
you give everything.
Yeah, I love that. I'll give you one of my. You know Neil Rackham. This is the best selling isn't all about your products and what you can offer. It's very much about the customer and their needs. That's Neil Rackham. Same. You got to give them what
Yes.
they need first. Then you'll get what you want.
Yes.
I love that. It's a digital one.
He was the spin selling guy, right?
Yeah,
Neil Rackham.
it was halfway. Yeah, that's right.
He wrote Spin Selling.
He did indeed.
That's right. That's right.
What I loved most was he had,
That's right.
back in the old days, videos of watching people for hours and hours and hours, like hundreds of hours of watching people. And one of the things that I stole from the research that I read on his was there was 4 behaviors that differentiates the high performing sellers from others. And it was, they asked twice as many questions. Back to you and Uncle Harry. They asked twice as many questions. They
Yes.
summarized twice as much, so the clients knew that they were felt understood, which links with that stuff you shared about autumn research you just read. The third thing was they were
Yes.
much more inclined to identify common ground. Do you know what the client needs and wants, and how we can be engaged with that?
Yes.
The fourth one was one which is, no one ever remembers, which is curious, which was called behavior labeling. They did behavior labeling 4 times more than less effective. So let me tell you what behavior labeling is. I've just done it. It's telling people what you're going to do. So what we're going to do now, the money side of things, I'm going to ask whether you're prepared to buy at this stage. So I'm setting it up. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm letting the client know what's expected.
Yeah.
So twice as many questions,
Yes.
twice as much summarizing, 3 times as much common ground, and 4 times as much behavior labeling. Just as a while we're doing sales stories. So some of these are behaviors, again, that you can identify and teach, but they're also, if we have a psychometric, you can link with what's people's natural preference, inclination, and disposition towards those kind of behaviors that drive effectiveness in sales.
Yes. Yeah. I think love that I reminisce on the Zig Ziglars and the Neil Rackmans and the Tom Hopkins and those guys. They were very successful for a long time for very good reason. I feel now we've reached a new generation or a fresh perspective, which is a lot more scientifically based, a lot more trait based, and a lot more individual specific and even client specific, if you like, rather than here's the 4 things, the 6 stages, the 5 closes. Everyone learns in every, like whether you're working for a big consulting firm or a pharmaceutical company or a photocopier sales organization, you're all doing the same thing. Well, maybe not.
I agree. I think those processes where people cracked, these are the things that tend to help, was a good start. I think you're right. We've moved on from that, and it should be more personalized. Yes. It should be more evidence driven. There is more science around it. And actually, even just if you step back to the evidence and the science, here's something that the psychometric can do for the sales individual, is to help them have the language to identify more about their buyer. What do I see? What are the behaviors I see from my buyer that's likely for me to be able to adapt and connect with them personally? Still authentically, not doing your acting and your disingenuous, which is the risk. But so for me, it might be slowing down my behavior a little bit more, and it might be being a little more detailed and precise in my language rather than my high, wide and handsome vocabulary. So I'm not doing it because I'm trying to take money off their wallet. I'm doing it because it helps them, it helps me connect, and it helps me build the rapport, which is at the heart of all sales. So yeah, if people can articulate those differences in personal style, they can then be more effective in the way they consciously make those choices for each client.
It's interesting you bring the client into the conversation, because the project I worked on recently where we used limiter sales and compared it to revenue and compared traits to revenue, so we know exactly what degree of what trait is likely to produce the most revenue. The conversation I'm now having with that client is they want to research their clients and ask them, how would they like to be treated, if you like. It's like a limiter sales client survey, if you like, to see how closely what the client's looking for. Because the assumption is that if you measure the sales traits and sales performance, those high-performing salespeople perform highly because they exhibit those traits, which is true. But potentially there could be other traits or different levels of expression of those traits that the clients are looking for that we're not aware of because we don't ask them.
And it could be that also the degree to which we tune into those is a drive or an inhibitor of revenue. Do we tune into the behaviors that the clients particularly appreciate or value? Do we know what they are, and do we tune into them or not? That's the
Yeah.
other side of the coin around what behaviors does the sales professional exhibit, but there'll also be other things that the client appreciates and values from that experience. That's a great way. I don't know
Yes.
much research where people research the clients about how it was for them, but the Wharton experience, the Wharton research you mentioned, probably gives some indication of that.
It does. I've seen research where you can mirror the culture and the client experience. What I haven't seen yet is research around traits and client experience. Like earlier we were talking about closing, for example. We said like collaborative close, intuitive close, decisive close. And in this particular team I was talking about then, the collaborative close was highest and the decisive close was lowest amongst the two highest performing people on the team. Now, it may be if we ask the clients, they might like a more decisive close. They might like someone coming in with a firmer recommendation about what's required, possibly, because we don't know. Just because the high performers aren't doing that, it doesn't mean it's never going to work on a client. It'd be interesting to get the client's perspective.
It would, and actually,
really curious.
Yeah, the process of getting that client data, it might vary by individual as well as by organisation.
So yes, it might. Although the way we're thinking of framing the questions is how you experience us, but I guess us would be that salesperson. That's the relationship they have. I'm really interested to see the outcome of that because my client has agreed to do that research, and we're framing it now. And I'm really curious about the results.
Me too. That's a fascinating piece of work. Yeah, that's very curious, and I love the idea of that kind of depth of understanding of the other party. Because sales is a two-party process. There's us and our sales team, and us. There's the people on the other side of the table who are also absolutely integral to the performance and the revenue.
That's the best for us, but it is that combination of traits or the way those traits are exhibited that is that most effective for the client. Because if you think of how, and this is a lot of the big Japanese organizations are very strong on this indispensable idea. They have this idea of being ideal for clients, and they think, well, because some other work I was shown by a client said that satisfaction's not enough because 80% of clients that are satisfied with their service are happy to change provider. The Japanese frame this well when they say we're looking for an indispensable, where the client sees us as being indispensable to their organization. Which way above satisfaction. I'm satisfied. It's like if I said to my wife, honey, I'm interested in a satisfactory marriage, right? I'd like to be satisfactory to you as a husband.
Oh, sure, that's a great...
I don't think it's going to work. I'm not a marriage guidance counselor. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah,
or if I said to my kids, look, I just want to be a satisfactory dad. So if we say to our clients, we're looking for client satisfaction, it's almost an insult. We want you to be satisfied with us.
Yeah, well, satisfaction is a sort of broad...
It's almost
it's a broad, loose bucket where I might be generally satisfied with the performance of Amazon delivering my goods. Why? Because I don't really care about the delivery that much. I hope it's going to be there on time. It's a whole raft of stuff that goes beyond satisfactory. Interestingly, I was reading a very simple book about customer experience, and the book is called Tiny Noticeable Things. Very simple, easy trait. Very easy thing to look at, which is one of those little personal touches that move you beyond satisfactory into that kind of, wow, it's not the same as indispensable, which is can't live without. But the tiny noticeable things are the personalization of the sales process for each customer.
Yes.
And that personalization, and I got it from work that I do in high-end luxury sales. I'm talking proper high-end. I could mention, Louis Vuitton, Burberry, Cartier, because obviously that would then you know who I was talking about. But I'm working with proper high-end luxury where the customer experience is absolutely critical as well as the product or the service. If you're dropping €5,000 on a handbag, that's not the same as buying something in the supermarket. The tiny personal touches are how it makes you feel. Those are those areas that get beyond the satisfaction and into high levels of rapport connection, which are part of the sales journey in that context. And actually, sometimes is important.
It's part of that brand experience. If you're buying that high-end luxury handbag or that high-end luxury bracelet, it's the way that you're treated in store, the way that the whole experience is part of what you're purchasing.
It is.
That whole brand experience is part of what you're purchasing, and that's like me. I feel like luxury. I feel like I'm being spoiled in this experience.
Absolutely. Everybody's got their own indulgence, whether it's your own favorite jar of high-end peanut butter or whether it's a particular tennis racket or a pair of sports shoes. Everyone's got their own indulgence. And actually, in these cases, in some types of sale, there may actually not really be a genuine need. There's a want. So, yes, you could buy any trainers you like, but there's a particular brand that you like. That's a need. Is it? No, it's just a want.
Yes.
You could buy a $20 pair, you could buy a $200 pair. There are some purchases in organizational settings which are also tied up with that stuff around a want as much as a need.
It is. If you think about that from, like, if I'm a client experiencing a salesperson or a client management person, I'm thinking, I want that special experience. I want someone that uniquely understands my needs and my environment. And why is that important? Because I'm willing to pay more for that.
Yes,
because
it's part of the value.
If I've got a parity perception, if I see them all the same, I'm just going to drive the price down and go for the lowest price because they're all the same. Whereas if if I get something unique and different, I'm willing to pay more for that. If that value proposition can be established. Circling back to that luminous sales piece, it's about like how those recommendations are made. Does that express a unique understanding of my need? And therefore I'm willing to pay more for that or side more favorably or recommend this provider to my organization. Yeah.
Or at least not try and chip away at the pitch into some sort of kind of market trader haggle basis. I may at least understand that is the price, which that seems a reasonable and fair price that's been put on the table. The issues about haggling and price negotiations are varied by culture and by region and by industry and by sector. But actually, if we position the experience of the sales process in such a way, sometimes clients don't even consider asking for a discount or a rebate or a deal because the sales approach and style has suggested that is the value of the way things are, and people go, okay, and they roll with it.
And I mean, a very early boss of mine, when I first started consulting, she was an American lady. I loved her. She had this phrase called sticker shock, which I'd never heard before.
Interesting.
Peter, you got to give him sticker shock. You got to give him sticker shock. And I said, Leslie, what's sticker shock? And she said her father and her brother were car salesmen working in a car yard, right? And they had this idea that like people walk around the car yard and there'd be a price of the car on a sticker on the car.
On the screen, yeah.
It'd be high enough to get on the screen. It'd be high enough to give the potential buyer sticker shock. They were shocked at the price. And she said the two big benefits of this. One is they think, well, this must be better than it looks because it's quite highly priced. It must be good. But the second is it gave the salesperson space to negotiate. Like, so AJ, I understand you think that's a bit expensive, but you're a really good guy. Love what you do. For you today, I'm just going to take 10% off that right now. Right?
Sure.
So it gave them some bargaining.
Yeah, everyone's looking for a haggle.
So because we were working for a consulting firm then, which even I thought the fees were really high for what we were doing. We were like triple what anyone else was doing. We're basically doing the same thing, I thought.
Wow.
And her view was you have to justify that value, right? You've got to justify that price. She said, we are the best. We are the best at what we do. And you've got to communicate that to the clients. You've got to make them feel that way. You've got to dress that way. You've got to talk that way. You've got to ask questions that way. You're the best. We are the best. And when you get up and run workshops, you've got to be the best because that's what they're paying for. And she taught me, because I was very reluctant to give them proposals. She would tell them the price on the first phone call.
Interesting.
She would say, look, very early on, she'd say, look, AJ, you're looking at least $100,000, what you're talking about. So unless that's in your budget, we shouldn't really continue the conversation because that's where it sits. If you want to get those sorts of outcomes and we can uniquely give them to you, it's going to be $100,000. And she'd mentioned that like very early on. Give them sticker shock. And they'd go, that's the opposite of how most people sell, right?
I have reached my own understanding of doing that in terms of the way I sell my consulting practice and stuff. People just will say, you need to find out how much it's going to be. I say, well, first of all, it's going to be hugely expensive. It's going to cost you a fortune. As my opening comment, just in that casual conversation, just like I did, and they say, can we get some more like for a 2-day event to work with our salespeople using human and sales as an example? I say, well, it's going to cost you a fortune. And I'll say through, and then later we'll talk about what I see on the grounds that you're not selling just the time, you're buying the expertise and the uplift you're likely to get from the if one or two of your salespeople get 3 bigger deals over the course of a year, you've made your money 3 times over. I mean, it's one of those things where if you don't value what you're bringing, don't sell it. And we're onto a different area, but that's something that I can go with.
If we're talking to a sales director or a sales leader, and we're talking about a measurable scientific way of looking at how traits are driving sales success, it's very easy to justify a budget that is requisite to the task of uplifting that sales revenue. Because even if the uplift is only $500,000, or the uplift is $1 million, surely an uplift of $1 million is worth spending $50,000 on. Or an uplift of $5 million is worth spending $200,000 on. I mean, you think, well, how much is that uplift worth to you? How much of a sense of certainty would you like? I mean, we can prove it with the numbers. You can give us your salespeople. We'll show you the traits. We can measure it against the sales revenue and show you exactly what your best people are doing best.
Yeah, and we can do the differentiator.
How much more certain can you get?
Yeah, and that reminds me of the director who says, what if I spend all this money and then some of my people leave? To which the standard response will be, what if you don't spend all that money and they stay and some of them leave? Yeah, that's a risk. If you don't, you're missing out that uplift that was likely to be X that you're walking away from by not investing. I'm with you.
One of my favourite football teams in this part of the world, they keep losing players because of the salary cap, and because they've got such a good system and they have such great players. What would you rather have, a team of players that no one wants to buy,
or a team of players
so you don't lose any players, or a team of champions that other teams want to buy? I mean, what devil do you prefer?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's the fact that there's some evidence and that you can get customized evidence for your own populations and in terms of their effectiveness mapped against revenue. That's a different approach than here's how some sales techniques, or here's some closing principles. Or
we all do challenges selling, or why don't we all do spin selling, or why don't we all do whatever the current program is? Well, maybe, but how do you know? Like, the question I'll be asking is, how do you know it's going to work?
Yeah.
How do you know it's going to work?
And the other benefits that are, once you understand the drivers of what's working, you can use that in all sorts of ways. You can use it in your selection. You can use it in your development paths.
Yes.
You can use it sharing best practice across your team. And you can use it to inform the kind of areas that you want to explore further. Like, okay, if those are the traits, who are my outliers? What else is working? And I loved your build that you were talking about with the client, where you were trying to find out, validating it at the client end. So there's a whole door that it opens that takes you down ways that can start driving performance over the short, medium, and the longer term, once you got the data.
Yes. We can ask the clients, what does an ideal experience look like for you? Because we are, like, I'm talking now as the sales organization, we are keen in being indispensable or ideal for you, or being your preferred partner in this part of your operation. What does that look like for you? Asking that question, rather than us sitting in a room and guessing what that might be. Why don't we ask them? And it's interesting, when I've been involved in this sort of client research, AJ, often the people I suggested to say, I'm not sure we should really ask the clients, they're a bit shy about it. But each time I've asked clients to engage their clients in this work, the client organizations love giving their opinion. They think, wow, it's so nice that you've asked us this. Where are we now? We're on level 6. Where would you like us to be at level 8? Well, we're committed to getting from 6 to 8, and we're going to come back to you each month until you're happy that we're at an 8. Thank God, I love these guys.
Yeah.
These guys care.
We're into that second stage later around the prolonged customer experience in terms of account management and continued process beyond sales. But actually, the the evidence could come from the initial parts of the sales at first, as well as the account management stuff. Yeah, it can be across the piece, and you can look at various questions.
It could be.
Yeah, you can have the questions that focus
It could
on
be
the
the
first
marketing
part,
communications. It could be the social media. It could be the sales collateral. It could be anything. Because one of the things that surprises me about sales organizations is how they sit in a room and try and guess what the client's going to want. And you think, well, why don't we just ask them?
Yeah. Yeah, why do we get some data? Why do we get some information? Exactly. And I think you're right about the clients not being as shocked, surprised, or reticent about such engagements. If the relationship is intact and it's gone well to the point where they've actually purchased, the chances are they've got some favourable goodwill and are happy to be asked. I guess the only question that comes the other way, what about those that we didn't get, the ones that got away? And that's a whole different issue about getting that data.
It's actually a bit easier because there's another part of this planning piece. There's like opportunity win planning. Like if you're working on a bid or a pitch and you'll go through opportunity stages. Mm-hmm. And the last stage is say close one. Like the first stages are like getting a client compelling event, understanding the client needs, finding an internal sponsor. You work through opportunity stage, comes to the end, and it's close won or close lost. And when it's close won or close lost, when it's close won, there's a win review. So why did we win this? If it's close lost, what I recommend you do is to invite the client in and ask them why. Not in an aggressive way. So, AJ, I understand you decided in favour of our competitor for this. We understand that decision, we respect it, but we're not trying to convince you otherwise. We're just really curious if you could just spend 20 minutes with us, just debriefing us on what worked or what didn't work for us, what the other guys did better that made you choose them. We're just curious, right? That closed loss review, that closed loss can be really important. It actually teach you more. You can maybe learn more from the ones you lost than the ones that you won.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great process. It's not that universal. It's not that widely practiced. And actually, if you actually individually ask the salesperson, they'll give you a whole pile of reasons about that, which may not even be valid.
Yeah. Might be their fault. It'll be someone else's. It'll be someone else's. But it's interesting in those conversations how honest the clients are.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, and they're not mean. They're not like a witch hunter. They're just saying, hey, you guys were great. And this happened, and this happened. There's always a but they did this, which we're really impressed by, and that's what we bought. And think, okay, well, that's something we should be doing more of.
Yeah, and for high value sales with high long relationships, and long time, it's a great piece of work to do. A lot of clients don't go that far, and it may be not appropriate for some types of sales settings, but I like it. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, but it's not appropriate in some, but it's appropriate enough to at least consider having that conversation.
Very much so. I like it.
And the clients are happy to share it. To share it.
Yeah, it really is.
AJ, you are an absolute treasure. I've known you for many years, sir, and every time I get an opportunity to engage with you, I'm delighted and informed.
Well, thanks again.
It's been awesome getting your insight into women of sales. In the show notes to this podcast, there'll be some contact details where people, if they would like to reach out for you to help you in their organisations, they'll be very happy to make that happen. But for the time being, AJ, I just wanted to say thank you very much, sir.
Will cost them a fortune, as we've already declared. Will to help any of the clients that want a conversation or a chat in any way that I can.
Yes, it'll be very expensive, but worth every cent.
Not at all. Thanks indeed.